Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to the show, y'all. Parenting from prison it's almost like an impossible task, I think. Most people in prison don't even, including myself, don't even take into account how it's going to affect not only our direct victims, but, our families, our kids, mainly our kids, right? The adults, they can handle that, they can adjust, they can adapt, but the kids, they really don't have that opportunity, that life experience that give them the tools to be able to, understand and come to some kind of resolution to where they can move on without that individual in a way that doesn't damage them as much as it does. And we don't even take that into consideration at all when we're out there in the streets doing, whatever it is that we're doing. Because, I remember when I left, my kids were like 2 and 3 years old, you know what I'm saying? So I didn't see what it was going to do to them. I didn't really figure out or quantify, let me say it like that they were going to really be hurt. It's like, I don't know how I missed that. I just don't see how I missed that, but because they were so small, my mindset was locked in to, they little bitty, and they, daddy here, daddy there. They get up and they go about their day regardless of what's going on, but I didn't factor in the kids are able to, especially when they're that young, they maneuver in a world based on safety and security. And when they feel safe and secure, meaning they see familiar faces and they have a stable place to live, food to eat, things like that, they move as if they don't have a care in the world. And sometimes that'll make you believe that they're going to be all right no matter what you're out there doing, right? Because what you're doing in the streets is not coming home. But when you get arrested, go to jail, go to prison, and is gone away from them for a while, that comfort, that stability, that routine that they're used to, it is upended. And it's torn up. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this episode. This is this dude named Stanley. I'm going to throw some of my own stuff in there, what I'm saying, because I cannot exempt myself. But this story about Stan, well, I call him Stan, y'all. This story about Stan is one of those stories that, that made me take a look and be like, dang, I was terrible. I was terrible. But check this out, right? Look, Stan was a typical dope boy, and when I say typical, I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody, but I say he was the typical dope boy because he did all the things that the average person out there selling dope does. He had a lot of girlfriends, even though he had a main girl at home. He out here having the babies with all of these different girls and doing all these different things and not taking into account that he needs to raise these kids. He needs to be there for these kids. He's getting all of these different women pregnant, and they are involving themselves with him because he presents this image of, I got you, I got money, I'm going to take care of you, and all of these different types of things. This is not about judging the women. We're not going to go there right now, but what we are going to do is that image that's being presented to these women is one that they see an opportunity for security. They might just like the Flash. They might just like that type of dude. Okay, let's go there. You know what I'm saying? Because you got some women that do. They like that type of dude. But neither the woman or the man is taking into account, if they end up having a child, what's really going to happen. And Stan, especially, he thought the more kids he had, the more, that he would be seen as that dude, right? And a lot of us do that. So he got kids all over the city. All over the city. Constantly getting into these shootouts and fights with other different individuals about where they can sell drugs, where he can sell drugs, and who done robbed one of his stash spots and all this and that. And eventually, one of those shootings and one of those, getting caught with that dope, it landed him in prison. And he kept putting it off as much as he could, but eventually you got to pay the piper. So Stan ended up in the penitentiary, right? He got state time and federal time. He got just a little, a little 8 or 9 year sentence in the state. And he got, like 3 or 4 years, however you calculate that in the months, 36, 42 months, whatever the case may be. That's what he had. He got that in the Fed. But the Fed time wasn't running concurrent with the state time. It was running consecutive. So he had to finish the state and then go to the Fed. So that means he was going to be gone. Whatever amount of time he was going to be in the state, he had to make parole, and he had to get parole to the Fed. Then he's going to be gone there. By the time Stan was eligible for parole his second time in the state, and he got denied, one of his sons was 14 years old. 14. And when he turned 14, because Stan had left a lot of money, you know what I mean, and had bought some properties and stuff like that, one of the women that he was with, she was doing pretty good. Plus, she had finished school. She was, going to school to be a lawyer and all these different types of things, and it's quite successful and all of that, right? But she still loved Stan, and she was standing by Stan, which is good, you see. But she was relying on him to do and say the things that he needed to say to his son, so that his son wouldn't follow in his footsteps. So one day, Stan called home. This is where I come in, right? Stan called home. He on the state phone talking to his son. We're going to call him Greg, right? That's not his name. Y'all already know how I get down. But we're going to call his son Greg. So he's talking to Greg on the phone. And Greg is asking him all of these questions because he's at school. These kids got these phones and they can access anything at any time. So Greg asked his dad, he said, "Daddy, what is resale? What does that mean with the two behind it?" So Greg was like, "What are you doing? Why are you asking me about resale?" He tried to be all evasive and defensive about it and all this and that. And he told him, he said, "Me and some of my friends was at school, and one of their daddies just got arrested for resale. And we were trying to look up what that meant, because they went online and saw, they got this, when you get arrested, you can go online and they got some of these newspapers that had you like busted and all that. They had your face on there, and then they had the charge that you got arrested for up under. So these kids at school, they took that resale label and put it in Google, and Google told them what it was. And that 2 they had behind them, meaning them, you know how they got Schedule 2. The kids didn't even know that. So he was asking his daddy what that meant and all this that. So he asked his dad, he said, "Are you a drug dealer?" And he said, "Son, why you say that?" Because Stan had never bothered to explain his absence at all. He felt like the boy was too young. But the boy was curious about his daddy. And he was hanging around some people that had experienced some things, and now they were looking, and it made him look, because he said, "My dad is in prison," and all this. So now they're trying to research and see why he's in prison. And they discovered that he was a drug dealer. So when he asked his daddy, what everything was, he also asked his dad, he said, "Daddy, what is distribution and all this and that?" So he's telling him all these different type of things, but he's telling him in a way where he's being offended by it. He's being offended by it. So then his son said, "Daddy, you ever have a gun?" And his son sounded like he was enthusiastic about the question, because now he's in his mind, his 14-year-old mind, with the capacity that he has to understand, he's starting to see his daddy as somebody that should be looked at in a good light. And his daddy didn't do anything to sway him from that. He said, "No, I did some things, this and that." He said, "But I heard that you shot somebody." Now, his son is asking people what's going on about it with his daddy. And here's one of the fatal mistakes that Stan made. He didn't control the narrative in that. He didn't explain to his son who he really is. So his son is left to find out the narrative for his daddy from the streets. And the streets are telling him things about his daddy that is making him look at his daddy like this stuff is good. And because his dad is embarrassed and offended by it, he's not telling his son that is wrong. He's just upset that somebody told him. So here's the thing. Check this out. His son, and this is important, you need to know this, right? His son is a virgin, right? But when he goes, he's his first year in high school, it means he's a freshman. Freshman in high school. Got the fade, he looking, suave and debonair, he dressed nice and all of that, because his mom makes sure he understands how to dress and all these different types of things. And his mom is on him because his mom wants him to be, one of those kids that does the right thing and says and acts the right way when he's in public and all this and that, right? But when he gets into high school, it's this girl that's 17 years old. 17. She likes what she sees. 14 and 17, it's not that much of a difference and all this and that. But they're both in high school. Both in high school. Now, Stan had bought Greg, listen to me, y'all, because this is going to give you an understanding of the age. Stan had bought Greg a bicycle. The school wasn't that far away from their house. Greg excited about that. He could ride his bike to school, right? But this girl that likes Greg, 17 years old, she got a car. She pushed up on him and she's talking to him, and Greg had never even kissed a girl. Never. So his first week in school, like that Friday of that first week in school, Greg gets a ride home from the gal. She got the bicycle in the trunk, right? And she's driving him home from school. Now again, the school is not that far from where Greg's mom lives, right? So she pull up at the house. The mom sees it, and she's looking like, what in the world? Now Greg is in the car, and old gal, she tries to kiss him, and when she reaches over to kiss him, she tried to put her tongue in his mouth, and he leaned back. You understand what I'm saying? He ain't never kissed no girl. Remember the mindset. You know what I'm saying? I ain't talking about some of y'all that grew up fast, okay? And when I say fast, I don't mean fast like you're hot. I'm talking about fast because you had to. You had to be mature real fast, way more earlier than you should have been. But think about those individuals, those kids that are not like that. And see, that's Greg. So he gets into the house, and his mom like, who is that? And he tells her who the girl is, and his mom said, how old is she? And he tells her all of the information that he knows about her. And they're both in the same school. And his mom said, don't be messing with that girl. You too young to be messing with her. And Greg, in his mind, Greg's like, Mom, I ain't even on that. Right? He ain't even thinking about no female like that. It ain't hit him like that yet. So when Stan calls the house, he talking to his gal, and she telling him all of these different types of things. Stan laughs, and she tells him, this is not funny. You need to talk to him. He does not need to be out there in the streets like you were when you were young. Because when Stan was 14, his mom having to work from 6 to 6. You feel what I'm saying? And when I say 6 to 6, I'm talking about from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. She gave him a key. And she told him he better be in the house when he's supposed to. But so when he was 13 and 14 and 15, he was already off the porch doing things. And because his son's mama knew that, she's trying to tell him, this is not funny. We don't want him to follow you in the same path that you did and end up out in the streets trying to act grown when you don't have a grown person's mind. So Stan is sitting there, he done took offense to what she's saying now. And then he hits her back like the typical dude to say, well, it was good enough for you. She said, but hold up. We were both grown. You feel what I'm saying? When we met. So all of that before me, you take that and put that somewhere. She checked it. You feel me? Now, she understood that he was a dope boy when they met, but he come with her like a lot of dope boys. I want to get out of the game. I want to do this. I want to do that. He saw a future in her, so he was really trying to invest in her, and he got caught up and fell in love with her. You feel what I'm saying? But she went on about her business and kept on doing what she wanted to do, even though she loved him too. She didn't stop scoring to school. So now she telling him, if you want to be in your son's life, you're going to be in his life the right way. And you need to talk to him. And this is where I come in. Stan gets off the phone. He all hot. He hot as chicken grease. I'm telling you now. Hot as chicken grease. He get off the phone and talking all crazy. I'm sick of her. She always think she know more than me about this and that and that. And she does. And he knows it. And that's why he vent like that. And he's just shooting off about this, right? And I said, bro, calm your butt down. What's really going on? And he's like, man, my son, man, he got, you know what I'm saying? He come home and old gal drive him home and all this and that. And he started laughing about it. And he was like, man, the gal tried to kiss him. My son don't even know how to kiss. I got to talk to him, man, because eventually, you know what I'm saying, she going to want that meat. That's exactly what he said. I said, hold up, bro. What you upset about, though? He said that his gal, his son's mama told him, you need to talk to your son before he ends up out here with a child at 14, 15 years old. End up doing some things he don't want, you know what I'm saying, don't know nothing about. Right? Now, Stan didn't tell his son's mama that. Stan had already been asking him about what does resale mean, did he have a gun and all that. So he's learning from the streets who Stan is and was. Right? He didn't tell her that. And he knows his boy's already looking at him like he's Superman. You feel me? So what Stan says to Greg is going to be important. So he said to me, he said, Joe T, I don't even know what to tell him. He said, my mama was working all the time. She taught me the right things, but she wasn't right there. You feel me? He said, man, I ain't mad at it. Circumstances dictated. My daddy wasn't there, all this. And you know, we all have situations like that. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people do, not all of us. So I understand, and he made some bad decisions and hid it from his mom. And when his mom found out, she felt bad about it because she blamed herself because she wasn't there. But this doesn't have to be with his son. But because he learned about sex from the streets, he learned about hustling, he learned all the things that were opposite of what his mama taught him. Plus, like I say, that talk that the dad is supposed to have with his son, he didn't get that talk. He said he learned it from videos in the streets. And he said when he got his first piece of tail, he shot all the way off. Didn't know how to act. Like my grandmama used to say, you smelling yourself. You feel me? That's how he was doing. So he don't know what else to say other than, you know, go on and get your son. Go on and do this, son. She gonna do this to you, son. You need to know what to do. That's what he wants to tell him. So when he talking to me, I said, oh, no. You have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to push your son in a direction that you can be proud of. You don't want to wait 5, 10 years from now and be called a granddaddy and then say, I should have told him this and I should have told him that. You don't want to do that. So he's standing there listening to me. He said, well, Joe T, I don't even know how to talk like that. I said, well, you need to learn. You need to learn. So I told him a few things about, you know what I'm saying, talking to his son about being honest with him about who he is, what he did, and admitting, if he believes it, that it was wrong. And I asked him, I said, do you believe what you was doing and where you were living was not the right way to be living? He was like, yeah, I do now. He said, but man, then he started smiling and laughing. He said, but man, I had fun. I said, kill that. Kill that. What was fun about making babies all over the city? What was fun about selling your poison to people? What was fun about that? I said, you in the penitentiary for all that fun you had. How did that work out for you? Now you're not out there with your son at a pivotal moment. I said, I know how that feels. I said, when I left, my kids were 2 and 3 years old, somewhere around there. Yeah, they 30 and 40 now. Close to 40. About the amount of time I've been in here, that's where they're at. Just like that. I said, is that what you want? Do you want your son to follow in your footsteps? He was like, no. I said, well, you better learn what to say. You better learn what to say. He said, well, what's wrong with him? As long as I tell him to have protection. Make sure he got that rubber on and all this and that. That's how he talking, right? I said, listen to me. You can tell him that. You can tell him that. And I'm not saying that's bad advice. Because, you know, if he chooses to do it. But what's wrong with telling your son to wait? What's wrong with telling your son that if you don't think you're ready for something like that, and then he asks you that question, what's that mean, ready? And if you want to know what I mean by being ready, you're going to have to tune in to the next episode. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I'm getting so tired.